It is an honor to be here for me this afternoon with such a great convention. And there are different uses of ayahuasca, and my presentation is focused in religious use. This presentation is based in my thesis presented in Stanford University, USA, as part of my Master of Comparative Law program. My personal experience as federal judge in Brazil, constitutional law professor, and member of UDV direction. Religion's use of psychoactive substance has been part of human history since immemorial time. Although it could seem different and primitive in the eyes of the major religions, the state has an obligation to guarantee the free exercise of religion. Religion's freedom, the mother of all freedoms, is expressly provided in several international treaties and conventions, as well as in the constitution of most countries. In general, states cannot interfere in individuals' private life unless they demonstrate a legitimate purpose, a compelling interest, based on a necessity. For example, public safety or health, and for the protection of rights and freedoms of others. Nevertheless, the harm imposed to privacy, personal autonomy, and human dignity has to be proportionate. If the government could not show a compelling interest to restrict the sacramental use of ayahuasca, the exemption has to be granted. In 1948, representatives from most countries assembled in the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a landmark in human history, proclaimed recognition on the inherent dignity of human beings, encompass fundamental freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Freedom of religion is a fundamental human right, an open texture clause that has to be interpreted in accordance with the evolving meaning of social relations, which frames a current and plural society, essential to promote human dignity. The international drug control system designed by UN conventions aims to protect the health and well-being of individuals. But this goal cannot be fulfilled without the respect of human rights. Recently, the International Narcotic Control Board, INCB, urged governments due consideration of human rights in order to avoid devastating consequences when implementing the international drug control conventions. The board recommended a human rights-based approach, applying the principle of proportionality and adherence to the rule of law inserted in the treaties. Nevertheless, in 2010, the INCB raised an alarm through its annual report about the increased interest in the recreational use of plant materials containing psychoactive substances. Although those plant materials and its presentations, such as ayahuasca, are not under international control, INCB recommended governments to consider, when necessary, due to unsafe practices and trafficking, the implementation of national control over such plant materials. The recommendation was reiterated in 2012 report, as well as in a special online publication in 2013. Since then, the INCB has not reinforced the same recommendation in annual reports. They are targeting recreational use and trafficking of these plant materials containing psychoactive substances, worried about unsafe practices with health risks associated and the commercialization of these substances. The strict control regarding the distribution of the sacrament used only in religious ceremonies prevents the diversion of the tea from the church to recreational users. As an expression of the religious freedom, ayahuasca should not be commercialized. The use of ayahuasca requires due care, responsibility, avoiding its merely recreational use, subject to disastrous results that could compromise the growing legitimacy reached with certain governments and institutions when used in a non-recreational set. Ayahuasca is a master key capable of opening doors of perception, but its improper use by people without training to guide and conduct a work safely can result in a bad trip. For example, a psychotic outbreak. An increase in reports of unsafe practices in media could jeopardize all serious work currently carried out by religious institutions with a sincere and safe practice. See, for example, historically, what happened before the 1971 convention was signed. A cultural favorable environment quickly transformed into an ambience of prohibition. The responsible use of ayahuasca necessarily involves a defined set of rituals and rules, with the participation of a guide duly qualified for its use, which will surely bring benefits to the individual, the community, and the society. Recently, a coalition of United Nations member states, United Nations entities, and leading human rights experts released the International Guidelines on Human Rights and Drug Policy, an important document published in March 2019, highlighting measures states should undertake or refrain from undertaking in order to comply with their human rights obligations, while taking into account their current obligations under the International Drug Control Conventions. The guidelines recommended the respect of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, even to those for whom such manifestations may involve the use of drugs for religious or spiritual purpose. In a clear and direct manifestation setting international legal standards for placing human dignity at the core of member states' responses, they exhorted the states to consider exemptions within drug legislation, allowing the cultivation and use of controlled substances for religious purpose, including its use in rituals and ceremonies. The religious phenomenon represented by the rising of a new religiosity based on a sacrament, ayahuasca, which contains a scheduled psychoactive substance, is still hidden by a curtain of ignorance and prejudice, leading some authorities to treat a matter of religiosity as a matter of criminal law. During the last years, people have been arrested, persecuted, or precluded from exercising their faith because the sacrament their religion uses contains a psychoactive substance. In general, government officials, judges, and prosecutors do not have accurate information about what ayahuasca is, beyond the chemical compounds, which erroneously lead them to confuse ayahuasca, a sacramental beverage, with DMT in its synthetically purified form. The proper way to respond is to inform authorities responsible to regulate, supervise, and repress drug use, offering them sufficient knowledge about responsible ayahuasca religious communities and the good example and practice they give. The effects of ayahuasca are well tolerated, and studies have neither demonstrated psychological dependence nor physical addictiveness. Research has shown it can be used safely in healthy adults. The UDV, for instance, an ayahuasca religion with more than 21,000 members, present in 11 countries, has a history of respectful and responsible religious work, functioning in Brazil for more than 5 decades and US for more than 2 decades, without a single record involving misuse of ayahuasca. Government should promote a respectful relationship with those ayahuasca religions and their members to uphold the principle of human dignity and the rule of law, honor the human autonomy of making the moral fundamental choices, and exercising its capacity for self-determination. To address a legal problem, the interpreter of the law should search beyond what is written throughout other branches of knowledge. The international system of drug control established as lawful the use of plants containing psychotropic substances for medicinal and research purposes. The UDV case in USA represented a new category when the Supreme Court recognized it as lawful the religious use of ayahuasca as a religious sacrament, establishing an historical precedent. Gonzalez versus o Centro Espírita Beneficente União do Vegetal is a paradigmatic case in the US Supreme Court history in freedom of religion, and it demonstrates the evolution of the jurisprudence in this subject, showing the path to a more tolerant world where human dignity is a paramount value, an ethical standard, an interpretative vector in order to reach government decisions that promote the respect to autonomy and self-determination of human beings. Different from US, the Brazilian solution was held in a multidisciplinary manner with the participation of the government, specialists in different areas of knowledge. The several work groups, for example, had in its composition specialists from areas of anthropology, pharmacology, biochemistry, social sciences, psychiatry, and legal experts. And the important recognition of previous history of religious use of ayahuasca by those religions without social harm to society. Although the chemical substance DMT is considered a scheduled substance in Brazil, the plants of the ayahuasca tea are not listed as prescribed substance. A statute law expressly recognizes the possibility of exemption in the case of legal authorization or regulation for a strictly ritualistic religious use of psychotropic plants, giving a legal protection recognition to the religious use of ayahuasca in Brazil. The Brazilian regulation of the religious use of ayahuasca should be presented as a positive example to be followed. Although still presenting some points to be improved, Brazilian authorities had an open-minded look at this complex phenomenon. The government recognized the right to self-determination to individuals in choosing their religion in order to promote human dignity, respecting through a long-term administrative process the chain of decisions already taken previously, enacting a statute law recognizing those religious practices and giving a safer scenario to members of those ayahuasca creeds. In general, this process is working well, and the religion which use ayahuasca as a sacrament in Brazil are progressively obtaining greater recognition and respect from authorities and society. The best approach to strategically position ayahuasca in the legal scenario internationally should avoid treating or comparing it to new psychoactive substance, or NPS. It is clear that UNODC early warning advisory system is not targeting ayahuasca, but only cat, catron, and salve divinorum, considering the category plant-based substance group they created. We need to differentiate ayahuasca instead of reinforce an erroneous categorization. It is a religious sacrament, not a drug. We need to inform, educate people about it. The religious use of ayahuasca is a legitimate expression of human dignity through the religion's freedom clause. We must stand for it. I invite you to visit UDV Science website and read my thesis about this subject. And I thank you all.